Hey everyone, Matt here with Nightrun Studio. In the last 4 weeks, I've taken my city builder game from a bunch of blocky lumberjacks beating on big blocky lumber to something much more exciting. Willard is a different type of game, where the city building is equal parts Stardew Valley and Age of Empires. Yes, you'll build. Yes, you'll defend. But in the meantime, each villager has a story. It'll be your task to find them, recruit them, and choose whether or not to befriend them. This means that right from the start I have to lay a foundation where villagers don't just become faceless copies of other workers, but actually retain as much character and personality as possible. It's only been 4 weeks so far, but I feel like I'm off to a great start. By the end of my first devlog, I managed to add some of my own graphics, create unique characters to spawn into the game, and I added my first occupation, the lumberjack. I also identified 3 key action points for the next 2-week sprint. I want to make some improvements to the code to make it more flexible and adaptable. I want to add more occupations for the villagers to do. And I need to create some new character sprites to add a little variety to the 4 people currently in my village. Let's take a look at how the last 2 weeks panned out. Last time, I created a cool system for spawning players, where I use a vanilla villager game object and then map on unique data for its image and stats. I was really happy with how this came off, but was concerned about having one massive script that did all the heavy lifting. I was going to have to rewrite this script for each new occupation. Because it was so huge, this was not going to be an easy task. Ben Indiver, I'm sure I massacred his name, a fellow game dev on Twitter, suggested I use a state machine to solve my problem. When I looked into it, I realized he was right. Without going into too much technical detail, a state machine allows me to make a short, easy-to-edit script for each state a villager might find themselves in. For example, there's one for walking to resources, one for idling, one for harvesting, etc. I then use a state manager to organize the states and make sure the right one is activated at the right time. And this might not sound like an improvement. Instead of one monster script with 1,000 lines of code, I now have 11 scripts with 50 to 200 lines. It's actually more code in the end. However, it is now so much easier to add new occupations. Instead of spending a whole day writing a monster script with all the logic, I can now implement the new job in less than an hour, because each occupation reuses all of the same code for the states. All I have to do is click a few boxes in the inspector to make sure that they know they're looking for iron instead of lumber. In addition to making development much smoother, this also makes my code perform better. When I want a player to climb the stairs, for example, he just runs this short script. Before, he had to sort through 1,000 lines of code and perform redundant checks and if statements before he got to the part where he actually climbed the stairs. Now, he just climbs them. Alright, so job number 1, code improvements, is complete. Next up was to create more occupations for my villagers. This was an area where I far exceeded my goal. Now that my code is so flexible, I was able to move at a much faster pace, spending most of my time creating the graphic assets that I needed for each new job. At this point, I have a total of 4 occupations in my village. Lumberjacks will be essential for adding wood buildings to your village. They can harvest any tree, though I have them set to ignore fruit trees by default, so they don't destroy precious food. In addition to harvesting lumber, you can also take that wood to a lumber mill to process it into planks. This will allow your village to move beyond wattle and daub style houses and build full wooden structures, like those you'd find at Baker Inlet. Another base level harvester I've created is the quarrier. These can clear land from rocky debris, but can also deliver the stone to masons to be cut into bricks. Again, this will allow you to build much sturdier homes. While working on the stone assets, I decided to make different stages in this graphic so the player can actually watch the stone deposit shrink. Additionally, the mason gave me some new ideas about how I could animate buildings to help bring my village to life. Adding this pulley system really helps make the mason feel like it's an active part of the world. You can't very well have a fantasy-themed game without miners and blacksmiths showing up at some point. The miners work similar to quarriers, hacking away at ore deposits until they run out. They then deliver their ores to the blacksmith, who smelts them into a usable form. This time around, I took my building to the next level by adding multiple animated elements. I created a water wheel animation and got a roaring fire going. I also decided to add some smoke. This was a fun process, as I haven't done much with particle effects before. I created this white smoke graphic, and then just shifted the brightness and made it semi-transparent. Now it does a fine job as smoke. And here is steam. Now that the village has its key resource gatherers for building, I decided I should really find a way to feed the populace. Eventually I'll add farmers, but for the meantime, I decided to create some gatherers. I needed some sort of fruit, so I created this fruit tree. I was always intrigued by Tennyson's poem, The Lotus Eaters, and the Odyssean myth that inspired it, so I thought I would make lotus fruit a staple of my village. There will almost certainly be some interesting lore and quest paths that will deal with this mysterious fruit. A really important aspect of city building in Willard will be the concept of stocking up to survive for the winter. To that end, I created a cannery as a place to store and preserve food. This time I decided to up my building game again by making this one a little more dynamic. Along with the animated boiler, smoke, and steam animations, the cannery also updates its sprites based on how full its storage currently is. My final goal for this 2-week sprint was to add some new character sprites to my village. Character art has always been a challenge for me, but I seem to get better at it each time I try, so no help but to give it a shot. I have an idea for a brother-sister combo of characters, so I decided they'd be the next 2 villagers I made. I learned my lesson in the past, where I would just create the full model of the character in a single go and then make changes based on the different animation steps. The problem with that is that each time I make a new character, it means starting from scratch. This time around, I decided to create some body models. Natalie is a short female character, but now that I've created her model, I can use that same model for future characters of the same stature. This has already saved me some time, as I needed to create animations for Catherine's walk cycle, and I just used Natalie's body model to speed up the process. I spent some time trying to get her pigtails right, make sure her clothes communicate the engineer-type intellect she possesses. That said, I'm not entirely happy with this character, and I suspect I'll revisit it in the near future. Natalie's brother, Ben, is a tall, strapping young man with a good nature. I decided to start with the same body model I used for Martin, but with a muscly twist. I want Ben to be a very likable and strong character who, for all his strength, is kind of lost without his sister. I think I ended up with a dorky surfer hippie, but at least it got me character designing again. While neither character ended up quite like I'd hoped, it was good to flex my atrophied character design muscles. In the end, I like the body models I made, and I think these characters will both prove salvageable with a little work down the road. The last 2 weeks have been jam-packed with game development, and I'm loving it. I get up shortly after 5 each morning, and I'm usually developing past midnight most nights. I take breaks to hang out with family and get out in the nearby mountains for a run, but honestly, I'm just loving being a full-time game dev for the summer. My next 2-week sprint is going to focus on moving towards something playable. I want to add the ability to place buildings, and I'd also like to start work on a day-night cycle. That's a lot to bite off, so I better get at it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please be sure to like, subscribe, or just leave a comment down below. Till next time, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.